Hi, boys and girls. Welcome back. We're going to read our last story from Chris Van Allsburg. My favorite. I say that for each one. The Stranger. Now, before we start, we'll do our riddle. The riddle is, can February march? Think about it. Now, I want you to be thinking about something when I read this story. It's a story about a stranger, and I want you to be thinking about, who is the stranger? Tell me at the end, okay? It's one of my favorites, I said. This one is in color, still illustrated by Chris Van Allsburg. Just love the pictures, and it's another mystery. It was that time of year Farmer Bailey liked best. When summer turned to fall, he whistled as he drove along. The cool breeze blew across his face through the truck's open window. Then it happened. There was a loud thump. Mr. Bailey jammed on his brakes. Oh no, he thought, I've hit a deer. It's a pretty illustration, isn't it? But it wasn't a deer that Farmer Bailey found lying up in the road. It was a man. Mr. Bailey knelt down close beside the still figure, fearing the worst. Then suddenly, the man opened his eyes. He looked up with terror and jumped to his feet. He tried to run off, lost his balance and fell down. He got up again, but this time the farmer took his arm and helped him to the truck. Mr. Bailey drove home. He helped the stranger inside where Mrs. Bailey made him comfortable on the parlor sofa. Parlor's kind of like a living room. Katie, their daughter, peeked in the room. The man on the sofa was dressed in odd, rough leather clothing. She heard her father whisper, "Must be some kind of hermit. Sort of fella who lives alone in the woods." The stranger didn't seem to understand the questions Mr. Bailey asked. "I don't think he knows how to talk," Mr. Bailey said. There's Katie listening in. Mr. Bailey called the doctor, who came and listened to the stranger's heart, felt his bones, looked in his eyes, and took his temperature. He decided the man had lost his memory. There was a bump on the back of his head. In a few days, the doctor said, he should remember who he is and where he's from. Mrs. Bailey stopped the doctor as he left the house. He'd forgotten his thermometer. "Oh, you can throw that out," he answered. "It's broken. The mercury is stuck at the bottom." Now, back in the olden days, they used to have a liquid metal called mercury, which was in thermometers. It's actually poisonous if it comes outside, so we don't want to use it anymore. Mr. Bailey lent the stranger some clean clothes. The fellow seemed confused about buttonholes and buttons. In the evening, he joined the Baileys for dinner. The steam that rose from his hot food fascinated him. He watched Katie take a spoonful of soup and blow gently across it. Then he did exactly the same. Mrs. Bailey shivered. "Brrr," she said. "There's a draft in here tonight." The next morning, Katie watched the stranger from her bedroom window. He walked across the yard toward two rabbits. Instead of running into the woods, the rabbits took a hop in his direction. He picked one of them up and stroked its ears. Then he set it down. The rabbits hopped away, then stopped and looked back, as if they were expecting the stranger to follow. That's strange. I know when I go on my walks, the rabbits run away from me. They're not afraid of him. A lot of clues about who you might think he is. When Katie's father went into the fields that day, the stranger tagged along. Mr. Bailey gave him a pitchfork. With a little practice, he learned to use it well. They worked hard. Occasionally, Mr. Bailey would have to stop and rest, but the stranger never tired. He didn't even sweat. Another clue. Love the illustrations. That evening, Katie sat with the stranger, watching the setting sun. High above them, a flock of geese in a perfect V formation flew south on the trip that they make every fall. The stranger could not take his eyes off the birds. He stared at them like a man who'd been hypnotized. So there's the V of geese in the sky. weeks passed and the stranger still could not remember who he was. But the Baileys didn't mind. They liked having the stranger around. He had become one of the family. Day by day, he'd grown less timid. He seemed so happy to be around us, Mr. Bailey said to his wife. It's hard to believe he's a hermit. Does everybody look happy in that picture? Another week passed. Farmer Bailey could not help noticing how peculiar the weather had been. Not long ago, it seemed like autumn was just around the corner, but now it still felt like summer, as if the seasons didn't change. The warm days made the pumpkins grow larger than ever. The leaves on the trees were as green as they'd been 3 weeks before. What? Another clue there. Who do you think he is? One day, the stranger climbed the highest hill on the Bailey farm. He looked to the north and saw a puzzling sight. The trees in the distance were bright red and orange, but the trees to the south, like those around the Baileys, were nothing but shades of green. They seemed drab and ugly to the stranger. It would be much better, he thought, if all the trees were red and orange. So all the trees here are red and orange and yellow. These are green. The stranger's feelings grew stronger the next day. He couldn't look at a tree's green leaves without sensing something was terribly wrong. The more he thought about it, the more upset he became, until finally he could think of nothing else. He ran to a tree and pulled off a leaf. He held it in his trembling hands, and without thinking, blew on it with all his might. Look what happened. He picked a green leaf, and then he blew on it with all of his might. At dinner that evening, the stranger appeared dressed in his old leather clothes. By the tears in his eyes, the Bailey could tell their friend had decided to leave. He hugged them all at once, then dashed out the door. The Baileys hurried outside to wave goodbye, but the stranger had disappeared. The air turned cold, and the leaves in the trees were no longer green. Every autumn since the stranger's visit, the same thing happens at the Bailey's farm. The trees that surround it stay green for weeks after the trees north have turned. Then overnight they change their color to the brightest of any tree around. And etched in frost on the farmhouse windows are the words, "See you next fall." Mystery there. Who do you think the stranger was? I have my ideas. And I think part of Chris Van Allsburg's writing is he wants everybody to guess and think. Maybe there really is no answer, but it's fun to think about it. Okay, back to our riddle. Can February march? Nope, but April may. Get it? February, March, April, May. Kind of a silly joke. Okay. We're just gonna do a little science. Now at the end, it said etched in frost. Have you ever had something frozen and you can write on it? That's frost on a window. Back in the east part of the states or the northeastern parts of the states, they get frost a lot more than we do. Sometimes we get it on our grass or on our playgrounds, but we don't get it too much here. We do actually, maybe sometimes when we take a shower, we get some steam that causes condensation on, hello, you saw my camera? On our mirrors or on our windows. Maybe sometimes when you have a cold drink and you notice the outside, it begins to condense and it gets water on the outside. Why does that happen? Well, water vapor in the air, there's always water in the air. That's why you can't see, sometimes we can see our breath on cool mornings. But we have water in our breath. That's why we have to be careful, especially now, to not spread it because germs are in that water or saliva. Now, it causes it to cool down and condense and form tiny beads of water. That's what's happening here. See? Tiny beads of water forming right there. the molecules get grouped closer together, and than they were in the gas phase, because they're gas here, and then they become a liquid when we are at this phase. Molecules make up almost everything around us, including the air. The hotter they are, the faster they move, and they're spaced farther apart. But when they get cold, or when hot, because I'm hot, I'm 98.6 or 98.5 degrees. When it hits it, the cold mirror, because mirrors are almost always cold, it condenses. It slows them down, and they stick. Now, I'm going to try to write a message. Do you ever write messages on your mirrors when you take a shower and it gets steamy? Let's see. You see it? It says, hi. Kind of a fun way to write a secret message. I miss you. I love you. And I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye. I forgot to tell you, tomorrow, wear a pair of crazy socks. Let's see who can get some crazy socks. I'll see you then. Bye.